Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Murdoch in the dock, and with us from London, Lord Tim Clement-Jones, spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats on media issues. Thank you for joining us. We want to thank as well France 24 International Affairs editor Annette Young. Also with us is Catherine Coll of the Sorbonne University's, let's hope I get this right here, Center for Economic Research in Anglo-Saxon Countries. Is that all right?
Hello.
Okay, how are you? And Matthew Fraser, who teaches at the American University of Paris and at Paris's Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, the France 24 debate, which you can follow on our Facebook page. And a lot of you have been weighing in on this one today. And on Twitter, where our handle is at FrancoisF24. So, as we said at the outset, Rupert Murdoch comes out calling it the most humbling day of his life, apologizing, but in the same hearing, he also described himself as a hands-on boss, the media tycoon, weaving and bobbing, like when he was questioned by Labour MP Tom Watson. Tom Watson, who, let's not forget, back in 2009, was the target of a smear campaign by a Murdoch paper, The Sun. Take a listen.
Can I take you back to 2003? Are you aware that in March of that year, Rebecca Brooks gave evidence to this committee admitting paying police?
I am now aware of that. I was not aware at the time. I'm also aware that she amended that considerably very quickly afterwards.
There you see Annette Young. It was an incredible performance by Rupert Murdoch. At sometimes searching for his words, at other times he knew exactly what he was doing.
Oh, yes. But, I mean, it's interesting, and James and I were upstairs commenting on this during the news coverage of this debate, these hearings, rather. And at the beginning, he came across almost halting, seemingly confused. And we wondered whether that was part of the strategy as such.
Although he interrupts his son.
He did. It was a very telling thing, where he leant forward, asked, put his hand on his son's arm and interrupted to say, I just want you to know this is the most humble day of my life, not even my career, my life. But as the hearings went on, it became clear that he became more and more of his old self, the old self that I know quite well as an Australian journalist, a man to be feared, a very savvy individual. He might be 80 years old, but his hands are very much clearly still on the till. And the fact of the matter is that these are the questions that will now be raised as a result of this performance by the shareholders of News Corporation, by News Corp management, about whether in fact he is still capable of leading the company. And as I was saying earlier, these questions had already started to percolate in recent months, given his age, given the fact that James Murdoch is clearly tipped to be the successor, and whether James was indeed up to the job. But this is very much, all these allegations have brought all these questions very much to the fore.
Tim Clement-Jones, when at one point during the testimony, he's asked, did he discuss with the editor of News of the World, the huge cash payments paid out to Gordon Taylor of the FA with publicist Max Clifford. He says, no, I never talked about that with them. In your view, is he just plain lying?
Well, I must say, I entirely agree with the perception that, Rupert Murdoch does seem to have lost quite a lot of authority in all of this. And I must say, I find it absolutely staggering that he wasn't told, if he wasn't told, about £700,000 payment in these circumstances. But his son James confirmed that in the hearing, and he's under essentially, I doubt whether James is going to lie to the committee. So the only conclusion one can draw is that Rupert Murdoch really hasn't been in control. And I think his shareholders should be horrified, although I gather the share price has gone up since they finished their testimony. But certainly, if I was a shareholder, I would think that basically Rupert Murdoch should be replaced as the chairman of News Corp.
And before I get you to react to that, Matthew Fraser, we know that Rebecca Brooks testifying as we speak right now, and at one point Rupert Murdoch, another denial, denies that he basically sank News of the World to try to save her career. Do you believe when he said that?
I suspected that he would end up shooting her when the heat turned up, which is what he did. In other words, he waited until he threw her overboard. She's still testifying, I believe, so I haven't had a chance to follow her testimony. I actually saw Rupert Murdoch, who seemed like a rather old man who was somewhat fragile. He wasn't constructing his sentences in a clear and coherent way. He didn't seem to be the commanding, powerful global press baron that everybody feared. I saw a very old, doddering man, unless he was acting cleverly, which you suggested. But
Possibly.
he didn't. He was gesticulating like this, and he was punching around a bit. I think his son told him to stop it at one point. So there was the leader. But I actually saw a man who seems somewhat not humbled, but diminished, weakened, frankly.
Catherine Coron?
Well, I personally want to emphasize the parallel with the financial crisis, where we had these hearings too, and all the time the question of responsibility, they say they don't have any. And accountability could be another one. I mean, you're supposed to have some kind of institutions controlling what things are going, how journalists or policemen are doing. So I'm wondering how they are operating in Britain, and if this is not like the financial system, probably they do exist, those institutions, but they can't operate the way they should.
There was a lot of selective amnesia. A lot of Murdoch, his son, and I believe Rebecca Brooks right now have been saying that they discovered things only recently, or just at the beginning of July, or
just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and obviously the strategy behind that is to put distance between them and those who they declare are responsible for the wrongdoing. Some people did some bad things, basically.
And Tim Clement-Jones, it seems as though some have more amnesia than before. When you hear Rebecca Brooks at the outset of her testimony this Tuesday, who suddenly says that, she may have said in the past that News of the World paid for stories, but she doesn't remember it now.
I know, it's extraordinary. I haven't heard the whole of Rebecca Brooks's testimony because I was on my way to the studio, but it is extraordinary if she's changed her tune, but everybody seems to be denying that they were in any way hands-on in all of this. So it begs the question as who the heck was in control? I mean, Rebecca Brooks should be the one who was, in ultimate control before James Murdoch took over as chairman of the UK operation at the end of 2007. But this is a kind of pass the parcel. And I think Tom Watson was quite right to use the word governance in the context of News Corp and News International, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who behave properly, who are accountable, not only to the shareholders, but also to the wider public for proper behaviour. And we see none of that. I mean, today's hearing has really confirmed that News Corp and News International have been out of control for years, quite honestly.
But I do think it's interesting what Rupert Murdoch said at the end in his prepared statement, which is when he was asked by Conservative backbencher Louise Mensch, this happened on your watch. You were the captain of the ship. Should you resign? And he resoundingly said no.
Hold your thought, because we can hear exactly what Rupert Murdoch said at that point. Rupert Murdoch answering the question, should he resign?
Mr. Murdoch, have you considered resigning?
No.
Why not?
Because I feel that people I trusted, I'm not saying who, I don't know what level, have let me down, and I think they behaved disgracefully and betrayed the company and me, and it's for them to pay. I think that, frankly, I'm the best person to clean this up.
He's the guy to clean up the mess in it,
That's right. I like the mysterious group of people responsible for this. I don't know who, but we'll find out.
He obviously doesn't agree with President Harry Truman, who said the buck stops here. He's the chairman. He's the chairman of the company, and ultimately he is responsible, as you point out, to shareholders. So he's rejecting even the idea, which shows, I think, a kind of an arrogance on his part.
Tim Clement-Jones, for viewers who perhaps have been following this very intricately, he's testifying before a committee that basically looked into the same issues in 2009. What do you think is the state of mind of the MPs today?
Oh, I think many of them were wanting to get even in many respects. They weren't just angry; it was a kind of cold fury to many of us looking on. I think Tom Watson, I think, is the most forensic because he's been following this story ever since he was himself a victim of persecution. I think that's not too strong a word by the News International group. And he has really been determined to get even all these years. And I think he's been one of the key people exposing all the behavior in News International. And I think he was extremely effective throughout the Select Committee hearing today.
Did you, the hearings that were not under oath, do you think that it would have been a good idea for them to be under oath like they are in the U.S.?
I think that's a moot point. I mean, I think I would like to see how these things pan out, quite frankly. It is not a court of law. We don't treat it like a court of law. People are on their honour as opposed to under oath. That's the way we've done it so far. But frankly, if it turns out that we're getting lies and evasion as a result of not putting people under oath, then of course I would want to change to a more rigid system. But at the moment, that has served us pretty well in the past.
Catherine Coron, before we went on air, you were reacting to the fact that something like this happens and there's this open hearing that it's not the French way of doing things?
No, and I think there is the problem of the balance of power. I mean, it's not a court of law. And the problem that here we do have the media having an impact on political, even the economic, because many people will lose their jobs. I mean, if Rupert Murdoch's empire is dismantled, many people will lose their jobs. I mean, it's difficult to have everything is going together, whereas it shouldn't be. I mean, all these three powers shouldn't be so. They should be clearly different and act differently. Here, everything is going together. So probably for a French person, yes, things are quite difficult to understand because they don't operate the same way.
It's almost the opposite, because if you look at the French model, the concern in this country, we're in France, is that the state has too much power over the media, right? The journalists in France are docile and they're à la botte. And François Mitterrand was spying on journalists, 25 years ago. I mean, that's public knowledge. So the debate here is that we have to worry about the state. What we've seen in England now is that actually it's the journalists or a certain number of newspapers that are spying on politicians and celebrities. So it's almost the reverse.
And the proprietors. The ownership and the plurality of the media is of enormous importance to us.
Entrepreneur.
But this is where the whole issue of cross-media ownership kicks in, and clearly this has provided an excellent opportunity for the government to address that issue. It's something the Australian government addressed back in the mid-1980s.
Explain what cross-media ownership is.
Well, in terms of restricting newspaper proprietors from owning electronic media outlets. And of course, we have had the situation in the UK where...
And in the US.
And in the US, where he owns both a television network and in the UK was attempting to buy back 100% of B-Sky B, while at the same time owning newspapers of influence. And the reason why he was doing that is that newspapers are declining in revenue. The money is in the electronic media. So he was moving towards consolidating ownership of B-Sky B, which he actually did set up originally in order to protect his other outlets.
If I could just add, ownership, absolutely. The other issue I think that's going to be looked at differently is privacy. In France, we know privacy is protected by law, which is why journalists don't actually investigate aggressively or look into the private lives of politicians and celebrities. The Anglo-Saxon or the Anglo-American tradition has been very aggressive. I think we're now going to see a slight shift at least in Britain, towards maybe more protection of privacy. Maybe not quite the French model, but closer to the French model.
Closer to it. I want to get Tim Clement-Jones's reaction in a moment because we're going to have to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
Watch all of France 24 on France24.com. It now features more content and is quicker and easier to use. 24 hours a day wherever you are, visit our website and catch up on all the latest news. Watch the channel in high definition. Pause live TV and watch programs from the past 24 hours at the click of a button. Find our reports, programs and web documentaries in seconds. All of France 24 in French, English and Arabic on France24.com.
Cosmic competition. In Beyond Business, we look at how satellite images have become a treasure trove of information for farmers, oil companies and mining firms. We look at a multi-billion euro market known as geoinformation.
Don't miss Beyond Business, Saturday 10:15 a.m. Paris time on France 24.
18.8 million passengers around the world answered the same question. Which is the best airline in Europe? Turkish Airlines was voted the best.